My name is Holly Amato, and today I have Lisa Taylor, an attorney and mediator, with me today on the Onward and Upward show. Lisa has been practicing law for over 25 years and has a very unique approach to family law. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. And before we get started, we are getting into that time of year when spring fever hits and we're all coming out of hibernation here in Michigan. Do you have any big plans for celebrating that?
Well, I'm looking forward to playing pickleball outdoors instead of indoors. So, that's a lot of fun. I love that.
I do too. I'm a new pickleballer. I don't know if that's a word to say I'm a pickleballer.
Sure, any word that you
may say that
use with pickleball is fine.
Okay, we'll just coin the phrase.
Yeah, it's great. It's great exercise. It's social. It's just fun. I'm very glad I discovered it.
It is too. My son taught me how to do it. He bought me the racket. Is it called a racket? It's called a racket.
It's called a paddle.
A paddle. See? So he got me a paddle and we had a ball doing it. So it's nice to be able to do things with your kids too. So
yeah, it seems like, so it started out as something for older people, but I play against younger people. And now I've heard that they're even doing it in elementary school. So it's really, and that's the beauty of it. I think a lot of different people can play, because either you can play really competitively and really like that, or you can just play a more relaxed game. So it really can be young to old, athletic to not athletic. People can play.
And the rules seem to be easier. So
well, the rules are a little complicated.
They are? Well, maybe my son was going easy on me then.
Yeah, if you really, to play a true game, there's a lot of rules and the scorekeeping's a little weird. Once you get the hang of it, of course, it's like anything, you can do it. But some people say that the rules and figuring that out is harder than playing the game.
Oh, that's funny. Well, yeah. I'll have to get better at that because it's going to warm up. Today's going to be a nice day. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, me too. Sun is beautiful.
Yeah, today I really believe that we're going to be educating people on an alternate path to divorce. Typically, we'd be looking at attorneys fighting for their respective clients and many trips to the courthouse for hearings, depositions, and other unpleasant experiences that I know I had to go through. But with your approach to mediating divorce, I think we're going to be able to offer an option that is much less expensive financially, emotionally, and mentally, not to mention saving a lot of time. So Lisa, what exactly is a peaceful divorce?
So basically you touched on it. The idea is to mediate the whole case instead of litigating it. That's really the basic idea. So I took the mediation training the first time in 1999. I was still litigating. Fell in love with mediation, thought, oh my gosh, I want to do this for a living. I just felt like that it was the right thing for me. But it was very hard at that time to make a living doing it. Plus, I just wasn't in a place to do that. So I kept litigating. And then I went through my own divorce and just, and we walked the walk that I'm going to preach to you here today. Because we just did it ourselves and we put our children first and we never said a bad word about each other. And we really did do it in a peaceful way. But I realized that was what I wanted to do. And so what I have learned is, there's so many reasons. I'll back up a little bit. There's so many reasons that I decided to start doing this full time. One is, and people probably don't know this, something like 97% of filed cases settle. You are most likely going to settle your divorce. You're not going to go in front of a judge and have a judge decide. But what you have to go through to get to that settlement, like what you just said, Holly, right? Attorneys just fighting and fighting, depositions, discovery, which is like gathering of information. That's usually the first 4 to 6 months of most divorce cases. That's what it is. It's fighting motions in court for temporary things like temporary child support, temporary alimony, temporary parenting plans, or fighting about the house if you're still living together and so forth. And it's just, all these things are temporary. They're not going to be your final decisions. And so what happens is you kind of hate each other more in the middle of this process and the end of this process than you do when you start it. It's really horrible. And so what I realized was, why not just start out in settlement discussions? That's really what the purpose of this is. Let's start out in settlement discussions and figure it out. You're going to settle it anyway. Why not do it in a formal way so that you can end up with a settlement agreement, and then going to court is nothing. That's really my goal, is to get the whole case settled, have a settlement agreement drafted, written, signed. It becomes a binding document so that when you go to court, that becomes the least of it. It's hard for people to believe that, but it's true. Because now you're not going to court for a judge to decide anything. You're going to court for the judge to rubber stamp your agreement. So most of my clients tell me they're in front of a judge for 5 minutes. So I've developed a whole process for making this come true. But that's the main reason, is you're going to settle anyway. And also, especially if you have children, you're going to be the parents of those children for the rest of your lives. That's your reality. And you have to figure out a way to coexist and even make decisions together, even though you're not going to be married anymore. And again, I am a divorced person. I have 3 kids. They're all adults now. I still have to deal with my ex-husband sometimes because our children need us, right? Sometimes for bad things, they get sick or they need help with something. And sometimes for good things, they have babies or they get married. And so if you've gone through a war, it makes it so much harder to do that than if you've tried to work together to figure this out, and it can help carry you into the future.
I just love that. And I wish I had found you sooner, because you've been doing this for 17 years. My divorce was almost 13 years ago. And I love the approach. Everything that you just said, and we're going to break down all of those pieces, because I think it's just, I love it. Even the title, A Peaceful Divorce. People would say, is that an oxymoron? Peaceful divorce? Is that even possible? My first question for you is time frame, because I know when you talk with an attorney and they really can't give you, they'll say, well, if you have minor kids, you have to have at least 6 months. And sometimes you can, get past that. And typically maybe it could be a year. And some people, I've heard divorces for 3 years. Mine was 11 months, and it was a tough one. What would you say your average, if you have those numbers, would be for time frame?
Right. So obviously I want to, every case is different, but I have been doing this for a long time. So I usually tell people who have children that probably us working together 3, maybe 4 months is my average. It can be a little less than that. It can be a little more than that, but it shouldn't be a lot more than that. Like if it's a lot more than that, we've probably gone off the rails somewhere. For people who don't have minor children, 2, maybe 3 months. Same thing. Could be a little faster, could be a little longer. Now, the 6-month waiting period, it's sort of up to a judge. Most of the time, if you use my process, and I can talk about this a little more, but you can file, if you have a settlement agreement when you file for divorce, or if you do it pre-filing. So you can do it pre-filing, like before anybody even filed anything. Or you can do it like you file the traditional way, but then you start mediating immediately. Like don't wait for late stage mediation, which we can go into what that is. So those are the 2 ways to do it. But if you do it pre-filing, that means that when you file, you'll have a settlement agreement and you can file a joint petition. There's a court rule that went into effect in Michigan in 2019 that allows you to do that, to have a joint petition. So it's not like one person versus the other person serving somebody papers. And the other thing a judge can do, they don't have to do it, but they can, is to waive the 6-month waiting period. So the reason there's a 6-month waiting period, it's like a cooling off period. They didn't want people who have children to just get angry with each other and go file for divorce and get divorced. So they wanted there to be a cooling off period so maybe people could get back together and so forth. If you've mediated your case and worked out a settlement agreement ahead of time, or, even before you filed, then you've spent months doing that. So that should count towards those 6 months is what the logic is. And then the new court rule that allows a joint petition says a judge can waive. Nothing in the court rule prohibits a judge from waiving the 6-month waiting period. So most judges will waive the 6-month waiting period when you do it this way. There are some who are sticklers and won't, but even so, remember, you can start operating according to the settlement agreement. You don't have to wait for the judgment of divorce. So even if the judge makes you wait that 6 months after filing, still you could be operating as a kind of divorced couple without that. You can put your parenting plan into place, divide your bank accounts, do all the things because you have a settlement agreement that you have signed that says that's what you're going to do.
Okay. And there's so many questions I have. First one though, or maybe the second one, when I think people are probably thinking to themselves, so what if someone's watching right now and they find themselves in the process of divorce and they don't like how it's going? They feel like maybe the attorneys are a little contentious. They feel like they want to do mediation. They find you. So my question is, in a perfect world, if somebody calls you and they haven't started the process, what does that look like versus a couple who maybe have attorneys, might have started the process, but realize they want to implement a mediator, and can they come to you and bring you into the middle of it? Or does it have to be like, do they have to start with you?
So You can do it after you file. It's definitely more complicated. So let me just talk about the pre-filing first. That is the majority of my cases, because that is the easiest one, because you're just starting from square one, and then you can design the mediation however you need it to be, whether you're going to have attorneys or financial advisors or other people in there or you're not. And we're starting from square one, designing the process that's going to work for you. And I can explain, I would like to eventually explain exactly what my process looks like. If you've already filed and you each have an attorney, well, your attorneys have to agree to try this process. And some of them don't want to do it. That's not, so that the normal traditional litigation process does include mediation, but it's very different from the mediation that I do and that I'm talking about. It's called late stage mediation. And so what happens in a typical divorce in Michigan is, like we said, the attorneys are fighting, doing discovery and, motions in court and all the things you said, depositions and so forth. And then about 4 to 6 months after the case is filed, the judge orders everyone to come to their courtroom and says, what's settled, what's not settled, tell me what's happening here. Most of the time, nothing's settled or very little is settled, because that's just not how, attorneys aren't really negotiating too much before that. And then what the judge will do is the judge will order you to late stage mediation. If you don't settle the case, the judge also will set a trial date. And so that if you don't settle at mediation, you're going to trial. So what late stage mediation becomes is almost like a threat. It's like this arm twisting. If you don't settle at mediation, you're going to trial. And most people don't want to go to trial because you don't know what's going to happen at trial. Judges can do whatever judges want to do. And it costs so much money for attorneys to prepare for trial. It's a big deal. So it takes a lot of hours, and it's so stressful for the attorneys. For me, preparing for trial, that was stressful. And just imagine for the clients who have to live it. So it's just this whole different thing. So you go to a late stage mediation, and most of the mediators also don't do what I do. So what I like to do is to bring the parties together, with attorneys or without, and we're all talking together, because I think that's the most effective thing. These decisions are for their life. They're the ones who should be figuring it out. My job, that's what my job is as a mediator, is to help them talk about it in a better way than they would if they're just sitting at their kitchen table together, right? I provide a different setting, a different atmosphere, so everyone can be heard, and I can be there to calm everyone down, to make everyone listen to each other. Don't interrupt each other. Come on, let's work this through, figure out what their interests are, their needs are, so we can really craft an agreement that's going to work for them and their family. So that's what I like to do. So I have my sessions are 2 hours long each, because I've learned over the 17 years, 2 hours is the perfect amount of time to get a lot done without being overwhelming. Most people cannot think about this stuff after 2 hours.
It's a lot.
And so, right. And so that's a different way of doing it than the late stage mediation, which a lot of times it's going to be 1 day, maybe 2, because you got to get it done. Right. So there's been mediations, I don't know if it happened in your case or not, but that can be 6-8 hours. Can you imagine? And a lot of times they haven't talked about anything before. So it's everything. It's the parenting plan. It's the child support. It's the spousal support. It's property and debt division, like everything all in 1 day. And so what normally happens is the mediators put you in separate rooms. So you go in one room with your attorney, your spouse goes in the other room with their attorney, and the mediator shuttles back and forth and tries to, in my opinion, arm twist a settlement. Sure. So no one's talking, the parties aren't talking directly to each other. So I always say it's like a game of operator, right? So like I, as the mediator, would go into one room and talk with them, and then they tell me what they think and what they want and so forth. Now I go in the other room. Now I have to relay what I heard. And of course, I'm going to use my mediation skills to try to say it in a better way and say it so they can be heard. Okay, so now I'm relaying that. Now they're telling me. Now I'm going in the other room. It's a game of operator. And we all know how that game turns out.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
As opposed to everyone sitting together and talking directly. So it's just a really different way of looking at mediation and way of looking at the case. So if you go to an attorney a lot of time, or if you have an attorney, that question you asked, if you already have an attorney and they want to use my process, the attorneys might both, fight against that, because they're going to say, yeah, we'll mediate. Don't worry, we'll mediate.
Mm-hmm.
They mean that late stage mediation that you're going to get ordered to. They don't mean mediating the whole case and doing it the way that I do it. And a lot of attorneys just are not comfortable with it. It involves a lot of emotion. There's emotion in the room. People get upset when they're talking about this stuff. Sure. And I'm okay with that. I can handle it. But some attorneys are like, oh, we need to separate. As soon as people get upset, yeah, we need to separate.
Oh, they're not used to it. Yeah.
They're not used to it. Or they think, uh-oh, that's going to be bad. They're going to say something they shouldn't say, or they're going to do something that I don't want them to do. So a lot of attorneys just really like that late stage process. So if you already have attorneys, if they've worked with me before and they like my process, they'll be like, sure, let's do it. And in fact, most attorneys who work with me, who are my regular attorneys, they always tell me it's a breath of fresh air coming to work in my process, because it's amicable, it's collaborative. We're all working together with the same goal of helping this family move forward. And that's very different from what they have when they're litigating a case.
Right. So if I'm hearing correctly, you can either work with attorneys or without attorneys, but the attorneys do need to submit to the process. And my assumption is that you have something in writing that they can look at where you pretty much lay out, and I know we're going to get into your process, what that process looks like. So could they just come to you without attorneys and have you do the whole thing? And of course, if they have attorneys that they want to use, as long as they're agreeable, it sounds like they can do it either way, if I'm hearing.
Yeah. Well, so I have to sort of approve the whole thing. And so first of all, so when people come to me, usually one spouse hears of me or whatever and calls me, and I explain my process and, exactly how it works to them. If they like what they hear, then they'll sort of present it to their spouse and say, hey, I found mediation and I found this person. I think she's pretty good. Here's her website. Why don't you give her a call? So then they call me. So if they like me, then the next step is I do another set of telephone screening calls with each person, where I actually schedule those. And that's where I'm going to ask the more personal questions about their relationship and how they communicate and so forth, what the issues are, all of those things. And first of all, it's to make sure mediation is appropriate for their case. But second, and most often, it's to help me design the mediation in a way that's going to make it the most effective for them. And so one of those designs is, do these people have to have attorneys in the room with them, or it's not going to be an effective mediation? Do they have to have attorneys to at least educate them so that they can then negotiate for themselves? Or do I think these people can do this without attorneys? So that's one of the things I'm looking at. Do they need a financial advisor? Does one of them need a financial advisor? Because one person's been handling all the finances and the other person really doesn't know anything, and they're going to need some help. A divorce mortgage specialist, I even have somebody like that I can recommend. A divorce coach. Sometimes I actually mediate with a divorce coach. So when I do this screening, I think emotions are really, really high and I'm going to need a little help, then I might bring a divorce coach in to mediate with me, because he's trained in that. So I'm good at that, to be honest with you. I'm a lawyer, though. I'm not a therapist. I don't have training in that. But somehow it feels like it's innate in me, and I am pretty good at dealing with that stuff. But sometimes it's just a little too deep or a little too much for me. And so that's when I would bring a divorce coach in so that he can help with the emotions a little bit more. So basically, I'm going to make sure that everybody has whatever they need to make sure they feel like they know what they're doing. That's the most important thing, and that they can advocate for themselves and they feel good about the process. So at the end, when we have that settlement agreement and they're ready to sign it, they know that what they're doing is the right thing for them to do.
Okay. Yeah, I just can see this in my head, how this could have gone. Well, maybe not in my situation, like you said, maybe not every situation this would work for every situation. It sounds like you've got to have people who are willing to submit to an authority figure. That's what it is, who's making some recommendations.
I have no. So that's what's really very important. I don't make any recommendations. Okay. I am not an authority figure, other than it's my process. So I'm in charge of the process. But I am a neutral third party. I am not giving advice. I'm not giving what I think should happen. Okay. And I'm not doing that for a couple reasons. One, if I did that, like let's say they were fighting about the house. They both want to keep the house, right? And I said, well, you know what? I agree. Husband should keep the house. Wife is going to think I'm on husband's side. Mediation is over. Both parties have to believe in my neutrality or this will not work. I can't be on anyone's side. That's exactly why they might need attorneys. They might need somebody on the side to give them some advice, or in the session, whatever it is, but they might need someone to give them some legal advice because I'm not going to do that. The other reason I don't do that is, and this is what goes on in my head to keep me from doing that, is who cares what I think, right? Because who does? Even if I, in my personal or professional judgment, would do something different, doesn't matter. I don't have to live with this agreement. They do. So my goal is to help them figure out what's going to work for them. So although I don't tell them what to do, I ask a lot of questions. I play devil's advocate. I really make sure that they're thinking things through in a way that's going to work for them. And a lot of times, because I am really detail oriented, I bring up things that they never even thought of. Like that's the other thing that I do besides helping everyone stay calm and listen to each other and talk in a good way, is to make sure I bring up everything that has to be discussed. And I guess that goes into my process a little bit. So I have developed a divorce settlement template. And that's what I follow. And I have cultivated this, right now it's probably like 80 pages long. Not that your settlement would be 80 pages long, but so I can bring things up to make sure I bring up everything that has to be discussed in a divorce. And what I love about mediation, this process that I've developed, is we can really fine tune it. So I can go into minutia stuff, but things that people really fight about. So I'm sure you've heard, and maybe it happened to you, I hope it didn't, but where people they get divorced, and then they come back to court and they're fighting again and again and again about
Thankfully,
things.
no. Thankfully, it didn't happen to me. But I have heard of that. And a lot of times I've heard of that because obviously I do real estate. And I was going to ask you a couple questions about that. When people are trying to buy and sell, sometimes that agreement has to be worded a certain way. And we do see people that have to go back and get an order for certain things, usually on the mortgage side, to show that, this person's not going to be taking on this car payment anymore. Or if something wasn't done properly the way the underwriters would want to see it, now they have to go back. So I always say, let's work as a team, your attorney, your real estate person, your mortgage person, your title person. Because I don't know. I think that title people and attorneys, sometimes they clash a little bit because the title person says it has to be written this way. And the attorney says, no, it's fine this way. Legally, this is how it goes. But the title person says, yeah, but the underwriter, they're not going to let us close, with it this way. And it gets to be, kind of like a power struggle. So
yeah, and that's very silly.
It's so much better.
Right. And so first of all, because I've done this a long time and I have a divorce mortgage specialist, so she's approved my language like from years ago. And so I do make sure, and those are questions that I'm going to ask. So like some people might say, well, okay, husband's keeping the house, and kind of, they don't even think they have to do much more than that. Husband's keeping the house and he'll pay wife, this amount of equity in a traditional divorce. Husband's keeping the house, he'll pay wife this amount of equity, maybe by such and such a date, and he'll get her off the mortgage, period. Well, and what I write, I'm going to write, okay, first of all, I'm going to ask the question, who's on the mortgage? Who's on the title? Make sure they get a hold of that document before we're even done, right? Get a hold of the document. What does it say? So that they know. And so then if they're both joint on the title, okay, and one person's keeping it, you're going to have to do a quick claim deed to transfer title. When is that going to be done? Who's going to do it, right? And if they're both on the mortgage, even if so I don't know how much your viewers might not know a lot about this, but so if you have to usually buy, if you're going to keep the house, you're going to buy the other person out of their equity. Because like if you both sold the house together, right? You would split the equity, like everybody you'd get your equity because it's considered your house. Well, if one person's keeping the house, the other person doesn't just, sorry, too bad, you don't get anything because I get to keep the house. Right. You usually do the math of that, right? And you figure out, okay, well, I'm going to buy you out. It's almost like you're buying the house from your spouse. Well, how's that going to work? Are you going to do a cash out refinance of the mortgage to get that money? Or even if you're going to get the money some other way, you still probably need to refinance the mortgage to get the other person off the mortgage, right? Because if it's a joint mortgage, somebody who doesn't own that house anymore is not going to want to be on the mortgage. Right. But these are things that I know, understand, and I'm going to ask them. And we're going to put specific details in the agreement about when that's got to be done, how it's got to be done, by what date, and what happens if it's not done. And that's what I was saying, that because I have these 2-hour long sessions, so we're just tackling one issue at a time, or a couple issues at a time, and we're going to keep going all the way till we're done, we can get that detailed. We're not rushing through it like in a litigated divorce, especially if it goes to mediation. They don't have time to work out all those details in that, 8-hour session or 2
Right.
6-hour sessions, whatever it is, right? They don't have time to do that. But this we do. We have time to really work out how is this going to work and, make sure we put it in the agreement. For co-parenting issues, I talk about stuff like the children's clothes. Are you going to have a wardrobe at each house? Or are you going to make sure you have clean clothes? Like people have gone to court over, I am always sending clean clothes to your house. You're always sending dirty clothes back. I'm doing your laundry. It's not fair. That sounds silly, but those are the kinds of things people argue about. Dating, like what are the kids going to be exposed to when a parent starts dating, right? Huge. It's emotional. And so I talk about it. Let's work it out. Will it be in the agreement? Maybe, if they agree to put it in there. Even if it's not written in the agreement, at least talk about it. Make sure you're on the same page about what that's going to look like. And we have the time to do that. And so my template has all that co-parenting issues, and I have this whole long list. And then I'll bring it up. And sometimes parents are like, you don't need that about the clothes. That's silly. And that's cool. And I'm like, okay. But it's just my job to bring it up.
Sure.
And other people are like, oh, yeah. Oh, we got to talk about this and this and this. Some people are so detailed. They want to go into everything. And some people are like, oh, we don't need that. And some in the middle. But you have time with this process to really work it out so that in the future, when things come up, instead of reacting, you can be like, hold on. What did we agree? And you can go back and look at this agreement that you created together to help you move forward in a better way.
Right. So clearly you're dealing with different personalities of people. And I find that when people are going through divorce, emotions are heightened, right? You're just all over the board. Would you say if someone's watching and wondering, thinking, my spouse and I, we have a really difficult relationship. We don't even talk. Communication is not happening. Do people have to be in a place where they are in a good place with each other? Like the amicable divorce, or can they just come messy and a train wreck to you?
So they can. I mean, that again, that's in my pre-screening. Those are the things I'm looking for. Really what I'm looking for is 2 people who are willing to try their best to be reasonable. 2 people who understand we got to settle this case. It's going to settle anyway. We got to figure out how to do it. If I have that, then most of the time I can help them down. I can help them. And the thing, I do most of them by Zoom now. I used to do them all in person. As a little bit of sidebar. But so when the pandemic hit, I thought that's it. I'm out of business. I can't do this if I can't be in the room with people. But I've done a 180 because when they can be in their own space, on their computers, they have dogs on their laps, cats on their laps. They don't have to drive to my office and sit at a conference table across from each other, right? So I am doing pretty much all of them by Zoom right now. But what I found is sometimes you need to separate people. Sometimes emotions just get so high. Like I like everyone to be together and work together, and I'm good at helping them. Like I said, talk in a better way. But sometimes emotions are just really high, or, you can tell someone wants to say something, but they don't know how to say it in front of the other person. Well, I can put them in a waiting room, or I can put them in a breakout room. I can go talk to them separately, help them calm down. And what I found is it can be really helpful too, because a lot of times they'll be like, the reason I'm acting like this is because he always or she always or 5 years ago, and they really need me to know that thing. And it's good that I know that thing, because then I can be like, that's what's going on. And I can help them deal with it. And then we can get back together again and talk it through. So there's a lot of techniques for that. If someone is really a train wreck, mediation might not work, right? It depends on, if they have a really good attorney helping them, maybe it can. And a lot of my attorneys are really wonderful. I mean, I think they're all pretty wonderful. Like they're very patient. They've been doing family law for a long time. They understand how to deal with these people. They share my values about families and trying to help them move forward in a healthy way. So if you have a really good attorney, even if the person's a train wreck, they can help, or maybe they're going to need a divorce coach. Maybe they're going to have to meet with a divorce coach. Or maybe you're going to encourage them to get a therapist to help them deal with some of that stuff so that they're ready to make these very emotional decisions, like, where your children are going to stay, and that you're not going to have your children living with you all the time. That can be heartbreaking. Right? That's the hardest part, I think.
The hardest part. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part for me. And I had the 80-20, I had most of the custody. But still, not having them even for every other weekend was such a big deal. So I can imagine I know you say you're not a therapist and you're not a licensed therapist, but I can, just hearing you talk, I feel like you have some skills in that area. I think I do too at sometimes, because you're dealing with emotion. Anytime you're dealing with people with
Real estate
emotions,
too, sure.
you have
Sure,
to know how
especially
to,
because they're getting a divorce, sure.
right.
And they have to
You're
leave
very
them in their
calming.
home.
You have that
Sure.
presence about you, which is really helpful. And I think you've really hit on so many things. It sounds like people can come as they are. They can come before or mid-process. You're going to be able to determine if it's a good fit. And it sounds like they don't have to have decisions made. This isn't like you come to me, you've got it all written down, and I'm just basically here to be the legal ease and, put it into writing for you and submit it. So
Right.
you have to have it all done.
Sometimes I have people who have, done that, and that's a really, really easy case for me.
Right.
But if that was it, then there would really be nothing for me to do. I wouldn't have much job satisfaction. Like, to me,
Exactly.
Right. When I have a case where they are like, oh, I can't stand you, or somebody had an affair, right? And the other person's heartbroken and they're angry and, whatever. There are two very different stages. That happens a lot too, where one person wants the divorce and the other doesn't. So there are very different stages of acceptance, is in turmoil, like grieving the marriage, and they're going through the whole grieving process. And the other person's like, acceptance, can we be done yesterday? So when I can help those people work together and reach resolutions that they really can live with and that they feel good about, yeah, that's great for me. I mean, that's very rewarding to me. And, I have a lot of laughter in my room, laughter and smiles, which litigating, I'm pretty sure most people would tell you, not a lot of laughter in a litigation process.
See when I would go to that courthouse, I didn't see anyone smiling and I didn't hear any laughter.
Exactly. And so a lot of times when we're finishing up, sometimes not, sometimes people stay upset and bitter throughout the whole process. And, that's fair. And of course, but a lot of times as time goes on, especially because of the 2-hour sessions, like as time goes on, they start getting more used to it. They start getting used to having to make these decisions and working together. And by the time we're done, they're actually in a better place than they were when we started. That's very rewarding to me.
Absolutely. Well, because you're taking something that's such a contentious topic and you're able to bring people together and, instead of having the War of the Roses, you can, again, we started off saving them some time, saving them some financial stress and emotional, all the extra stress that is on top of the fact that your life is just being, pulled apart and you're reconfiguring everything.
That's exactly the word I need. That's funny that you said that, because that's what I tell people. I say, you're reconfiguring your family.
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening. Because if you have children, if you don't have children, you can just separate. But, you have children, it's still going to be a family like we talked about. You're going to be the co-parents of those kids for the rest of your life. So you're reconfiguring your family, and you're just figuring out a way to do that in a way that's going to work for you and your children. I guess one more thing I was just thinking, I don't know how come my brain went there, but about attorneys, because sometimes people will be like, well, if I'm going to use attorneys, especially if they're going to have attorneys sit in the sessions with us to help them advocate for themselves or help them figure things out, what do we need to mediate for? And we've alluded to this, but it's hard for people who haven't been through it to understand it. It's such a different process, and you're using your attorneys for such a different purpose. And you're in control too. So when you hire an attorney to litigate your case, they take over the case, which they should. That's their job. They're going to do what they need to do. And you're going to get the end of the month billing saying, they wrote this pleading, or they did this, discovery process, or they filed this motion in court. You're going to get things in the mail, like motions that were filed against you that you didn't know anything about until you opened the envelope, things like that. And so your attorneys are taking care of the case without you. You don't have really control about that. In this process, you're going to decide how much or how little you use an attorney. Like, you might say, you know what, I don't need you to help me with this. I just need you to help me with this. And it's not going to be a surprise either. You're going to know what your attorney is doing every step of the way, because it's a collaborative process. We're all working on it together. And so you're using them for so many fewer hours. You're in control of those hours. And so, yeah, I'm not going to say it's not expensive to use me and 2 attorneys sitting in the sessions for every session. Of course it is. But I can almost guarantee that whatever it costs in my process, even if we have attorneys sitting in every session, it's less than what it would do if it cost you if you had that litigated case where the attorneys are just taking over and doing it that way. So, and I do have on my website, I think it's on the first page, and there's also a tab where I created a table that shows the difference between a traditional litigated divorce and a pre-filed mediated case. And it's not exaggerated. What I wrote in there is really true.
I think everyone needs to go to your website unless they're happily married. Then don't go, right? You don't want that to be
No.
saved in Google and have your spouse get on the computer and have a slight heart attack. Anyone who's considering that, because I feel like, for me anyways, back when I was getting divorced, I think the stat was like that people contemplate it for an average of about 3 years before filing, if they're the ones that filed. That you don't typically just wake up one morning and go file for divorce, right? People don't typically, the typical situation, especially with kids, you don't want to do that. So it's something that people have been contemplating, and just giving them this outlet, to have you there. And I agree with everything that you've said, even though I didn't have the option. I didn't know about you. Again, I wish I would have, but I can echo the fact that going through the process myself and experiencing having 2 attorneys, I believe the process took longer. We actually ended up in arbitration. So the mediation didn't go well, which I won't go into.
Was it the late stage mediation that you were ordered to it toward the end of the case?
No, we weren't ordered to it. It was, I think our attorneys recommended it because things weren't getting done and people weren't always showing up in some things. But we did both agree to arbitration because it was going to be that or trial. And I know that neither of us wanted to go to trial. We really weren't fighting over custody. So there wasn't much to fight over. It was just contentious. So we went through an arbitrator, which it was like that little room, and he had the robe on as if he was a judge, and his decision was final. And then we went in the court, and the judge just basically pounded the gavel and we got our papers. But I know that had we done it with you, having that extra person, almost like a buffer where you're kind of keeping everyone in line. The attorneys know that what your purpose is. They understand that they are there to be the trusted guide. Like, I feel like I'm a trusted guide in real estate, instead of the attorneys who feel like they've got to go head to head, and maybe some bravado sometimes, or ego, not all of them, but it could happen, right? Like that win mentality. Now they understand, okay, I'm here just for the wife, or I'm here just for the husband. And I'm going to say, okay, she's talking about real estate right now. So here's the thing, if you were to sell now, you're at a 3% mortgage. And right now it's at almost 7%. So understand what that looks like to refinance if you think you're going to keep the house, having those conversations.
Right.
And really giving them more to think about.
So it really takes a paradigm shift for the attorneys. So I had a paradigm shift when I took the training. I think I told you I took it in 1999. I was still a litigator then. In the it's a 40-hour training, and it was just the civil training. Then later I took the family to take training. So it's a 40-hour training, and part of it is role plays. And when you do, I know it's hard to believe, but when you do role plays, you really get into it. Like, even if you're acting as the husband or the wife or the plaintiff or the defendant, or you're acting as the mediator or the attorneys, you get into it and you really believe it. And what happened, I had this paradigm shift, this light bulb moment where it was like, you know what? The clients don't need me to be their parent. They don't need me to tell them what they should or shouldn't do. They're quite capable of figuring out resolutions for their life, for themselves, as long as they're given the right process and the right people helping them do that. And so that was like such a light bulb moment for me. And that has guided me as a mediator ever since. But so the attorneys that I work with, the successful ones, they have had that same paradigm shift. So exactly what you said, they're there if there's a question of law that comes up, or if their clients are like, I don't know what to do, and they need advice, and they're asking for advice. But if they're just sitting, if the attorney, I always tell them this, if you're sitting there, attorneys, and you don't say a word throughout this whole session, that's awesome. That means the clients are doing it themselves and they don't need you. And that's such a beautiful thing. So please don't interject yourself into it just because you feel like you should, right? And zip it if but you're there, but they're there if you need them. And sometimes people do need them, but it's just a different way of looking at the whole thing.
I love all of this. This has been such an amazing conversation. So I think we've covered, in a nutshell, obviously, there's so many different directions. But before we end, I'd love to know, is there anything else that you feel really important for anyone watching to know about what you do and how you do it?
Just to be open to that there's a different way. And a lot of times if you tell family or friends that you're thinking about mediating instead of litigating, There's, oh, don't do that. No, you have to get an attorney. Don't do that. And so what I would say is, you know what, use your family and friends for moral support. That's awesome. You need every emotional support, but go to professionals to figure out how you should handle your divorce. So you can give me a call, look at my website, other people that, like me, and make your own decision. Talk to some attorneys, some financial advisors. That's how you should make these decisions. Don't be scared into, and there's some attorneys, not all, because there's a lot of wonderful attorneys out there, but there's some attorneys that will scare you. You'll go have a consultation with them and they will say, oh, you got to file. You got to be the one who files first, and you got to do this and you got to do that. And they scare you. And sometimes that's valid. Like if you really believe your spouse might hide assets or might start doing something with the finances, or you're not going to be protected, or if there's domestic violence, then the attorney should scare you, and that's fair, and you need to take action to protect yourself. But if that's not really true, don't let them scare you into thinking you must do it the traditional way or you're somehow going to lose out. There are alternatives, and if you can be open to that, then it's really going to be better for you and your family in the long run.
Absolutely. Wow. What a great conversation. Thank you again for joining me today, Lisa, and sharing your expertise, your innovative process to divorce in such a much less stressful capacity. I'm sure that our listeners are going to want to know how they can reach you. So please let us know what's the best way to get in touch.
Well, there's my website, which I think has, a lot of good information on it, as well as, of course, you can, contact me through that. And that is what I've been told. It's easy to remember, but hard to type or write, but it's www.apeacefuldivorce.com. And you have to put the A in front of it or else you get an attorney in California, I think.
No.
Peaceful is one L. So apeacefuldivorce.com. My phone number, give me a call is perfectly fine. That's 248-909-0631. LinkedIn, but I don't really do much with it. So those are probably the best ways.
Perfect. And all that's going to be loaded below so everyone can find you. So that'll be perfect. Go to your website, give you a call. And, thanks again, Lisa. It's been such a pleasure having you on to share such a great opportunity for people that are going through a tough spot to find some peace, really and truly. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's what I hope to give them. And thank you so much for having me and for having this forum. I mean, it's, and that what you're doing to reach out to people who are going through a divorce and give them ideas and thoughts and information. It's really great what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Well, when you know better, you do better. And that's what we do, right? We go through tough things. We want to have a hand down to help the next group of people who are going through it. So I just applaud you again for everything that you're doing in this space. So it's awesome. And I'll be sending, I hope I don't have to send a lot of people because it's not like I want a lot of people to get divorced. But
yeah. Well, I don't advocate for divorce, by the way.
We're not advocating for it.
But if you're getting a divorce, I know that this is the way to do it.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that this option is available. And, Lisa and I really want to thank all of you for joining us today. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like our episode, tap the bell for notifications so that you will be the first to know when new episodes of the Onward and Upward podcast are posted. Everybody be blessed.